Hey, good evening. Eric Arnold here in my politics barn. That's what I like to call my studio. It's an actual barn where I've got some of the cheapest lighting equipment you could possibly imagine, lighting my dingy studio where I like to primarily do sports handicapping, but we also make the occasional politics video because the political issues in this country at the moment are so critical, so important that we have a window to speak at the moment. And if we don't speak, that window is going to be closed and we won't be able to speak. So now is the time. So in this episode of the Politics Barn, we're going to talk my favorite subject, vaccination mandates, and a couple polls that have come out that I think illuminate some, I would call it kind of alarming things that you kind of suspected were going on out there, but this kind of brings it a little closer to home that maybe it is actually going on out there, some alarming things about mandates and what part of this country would like to do to another part of the country. And will that actually lead to a shooting civil war? So let's catch up. As I said in a number of previous videos that we were heading up to a decision by the Supreme Court as to whether or not Joe Biden's draconian mandate through the OSHA administration or OSHA agency, whatever, employers of 100 employees or more had to make sure their employees were vaccinated or set up some kind of regular over and over and over and over and over and over again testing regimen, which basically the employer would have just gone, you're either vaccinated or you're out of here. So the Supreme Court struck it down partially, 6-3, but they allowed it to go into effect for healthcare workers, which is, 5-4 in support of the mandate for healthcare workers, 6-3 against for private businesses of 100 employees or more. And of course, the two switched. Roberts, no surprise there, and then Kavanaugh. So I'd have to give Trump a C on his Supreme Court nominees. You're saying that's kind of tough. I mean, we got one out of the two. I don't know why it's so hard to get an attorney and get him through the court or through the Congress and confirm the Supreme Court. It's going to follow the rules. I don't know why that's so hard. I mean, maybe it's easy to me because I'm a sports handicapper and I can relatively predict what's going to happen a lot of the time. All you got to do is look at the resumes. So, okay, if this guy has elitist stuff on his resume, he's likely to flip at some point. He cannot be trusted. He thinks he's smarter than everybody else, and he will not follow the law as written. And that's Kavanaugh. So, Trump gets a C. He should have gotten better grade than that. But, hey, Bush put some real clunkers on the court, too. Both Bushes, I guess. I'm thinking of Souter. So that was Grandpappy Bush put him on there. I think he was a conservative for about never, and then immediately voted with the liberal bloc his entire tenure on the court. So basically, we got, I would say, 70-30 of what we wanted. We wanted the mandate to be struck down because it would have just caused absolute chaos in this country. Everything that's bad in this country would have gotten worse if that mandate had gone into effect. It would have done nothing good at all, nothing. So luckily, we got the votes for the mandate struck down. So let me move on to some of these polls that I saw here. And this got me thinking about Civil War. There's a poll floating around out there done by Rasmussen. It seems like these polls always have something attached to them. Another Rasmussen in conjunction with blah, blah, blah. Or CBS in conjunction with YouGov. And I forget what Rasmussen his partner is, but let's just say Rasmussen. So I looked at that and I thought they're asking some pretty good questions about mandates and what should we do with the unvaccinated and that sort of thing. So I wanted to highlight some of this here. Now, in the Rasmussen poll, it breaks down evenly on the mandates, which I found very disturbing, that it was even. 48-48. 48% in favor of mandates, 48% against mandates. And then, you always got that unsure 4 or 5% that you could ask them, do you like sex? Well, I don't know. I mean, the last girlfriend I had, she didn't really know how to do this. They're never sure of anything. I mean, so, these are people that are, God help those kind of people. But 48-48. So I found that disturbing. And that's not been my personal experience with these mandates. As I pointed out, I have a number of Democrat friends, and now let's face it, any Democrat friend of mine that has any idea of where I stand on this probably wouldn't have the balls to come up to me and go, yeah, I think we should lock people up. In fact, I'm all for it, and fuck those people. No, so that no one's done that yet, and that may be their actual feelings on it, but they haven't done that yet. So maybe that exists, but I have had a number of these Democrats kind of say, yeah, I really don't favor these mandates. So I'm kind of thinking, now in the CBS poll I alluded to, it was more like 60-40 against the mandates, which is kind of where I think it's at. That a sizable 60-40, I'm going to say, is a majority, bordering on sizable in this country, that mandates are not the way to go. And that's kind of where I feel it's at. But for whatever reason, Rasmussen here had it even, 48-48. Now, in the Rasmussen poll, there's some other things I wanted to dig into. Now, here's their question. I'm going to put it up here so you can read it, if you can read it. I know everybody reviews these videos on their phone and you can't see anything, so you just have to listen to me talk. The question is, do you favor having the unvaccinated restricted to their homes? In other words, and they can't go out except in emergencies. Unvaccinated are restricted to their homes, except in an emergency. And the total number there was 61. Let's see, we'll put it like this. 4 locking them up against. And the overall number there was 34% were for locking them up and 61% was against. Now I thought to myself, 34, 1/3 of this country is for locking up unvaccinated people? I don't know if they understand what that means. It's like, do you get the ramifications of that? That's a civil war. Do you really think these unvaccinated people are just going to sit in their homes and go, well, I guess I'll just sit here until my bank account runs dry, and then maybe I'll get this vaccination that I've swore I'd get over my dead body. Then I guess, I don't know, I don't know what I'll do. I guess I'll starve to death. Do you really think they're going to do that? I mean, anyway, 1/3 of Americans are in favor of locking up the unvaccinated in their homes just basically for good until they get the vaccination. So I found that. Now, it breaks down some, then it gets into the subgroups, which that's where I find some of this interesting. Here is older people, and I'm going to say adults, 40 and up. These are what I would call adults. We got 26 to 69. That's 40 years and up. They broke it into actually 2 subgroups. It was there 40 to 64 and then 65 and up. And the numbers were almost identical to, 69, 68, 26, 27. So I just conflated them together. 26% of the old people are for locking up their fellow Americans. 69% are against it. So therefore, you go to yourself, well, where's the other made up? This I just found. This just blew me away here. 48%. Now, who are they polling? I want to make sure you political scientists out there who haven't looked up this poll yourself are going, you're leaving out the most important part. What was polled? Likely voters. Likely voters. They didn't poll Republicans. They didn't poll Democrats. They polled likely voters. From 18 to 39 years old, 48% are for locking up fellow Americans, 45% are against it. So young people, it's basically just spelling out that we conservatives have completely punted and abdicated our responsibility to educate our youth, that they're being indoctrinated at a rate that should be frightening to us. Now, we have the advantage of reality. Reality is undefeated for the most part. It may take a while, but reality is reality. And whatever kind of world you want to live in, and you want to call the sky purple or pink or green or whatever, reality is the sky for the most part is blue, and you can't change that. So reality is relatively undefeated, and reality often changes these little Marxists that come out of high school and college and turns them into rational people after they get punched in the face a few times by reality. So, geez, I actually have to go to work? Shit, they actually expect me to do things and not just spout platitudes and just because I check a box on a resume. That wasn't enough. I have to actually go to work. Oh my God. They actually learn that life's not fair, or maybe in a way life is fair, in that you get what you put into it. And if you sit on your ass and do nothing all day and complain about how the world's not fair and everybody's against you, well, you're not going to get very far. And if you can figure that out, you probably stop being a little Marxist. So at the moment, 45 of the young people want to lock up unvaccinated people, which I find disturbing. Now, if you get into the Democrat GOP split, Republicans, it's 79 to 17. GOP people do not want to lock up the unvaccinated, whereas 59% of Democrats, people that identify on the phone to these pollsters as Democrats, 59% to 36% want to lock up the unvaccinated. 59% of Democrats to 36% of Democrats want to lock up the unvaccinated. That's disturbing. That's disturbing. To take it a step further, this weekend, and I don't know if the two were related, this poll and the second event, which is that the Salt Lake Tribune, that's in Utah. I think the last time Utah voted for a Democrat might have been FDR in the 30s. The Salt Lake Tribune came out and said, why do we not let the National Guard go out and force these unvaccinated people to stay in their houses? Which is essentially what this Rasmussen question is asking. Should we lock them up? And the Salt Lake Tribune says, hell yes, let's lock them up. What the hell? I mean, kudos to the Salt Lake Tribune. I mean, let's go there. Let's get it out there. I mean, hey, at least you're honestly espousing what a super majority of Democrats believe. So let's get it out there. Now, the Salt Lake Tribune, I said Utah's a red state, Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the ownership of a newspaper. The Salt Lake Tribune is owned by the Huntsman family. If you remember that, I think John Huntsman ran for president for about half an hour, former elitist governor of Utah, billionaire. His father's a billionaire, and the whole family's billionaires. So elitists, authoritarians, about as much in touch with the people as a Martian would be in touch with the Dallas Cowboys. So the elitist Salt Lake City Tribune want to lock up the unvaccinated. So, this is kind of where I'm thinking about this. And I'm thinking to myself, do they know what this means? This means war, as Bugs Bunny would have said. These unvaccinated people, it's a sizable percentage of the population in the U.S. here. I would say that have had no shots whatsoever, probably 25 to 30%. That have had just one shot, you're probably in the 35 to 40% range. I got those numbers from the Mayo Clinic. They've got a chart, I guess they track this stuff at the Mayo Clinic. So that's a lot of people. And furthermore, I know a lot of these Democrats think that it's all MAGA hat wearing Trump troglodytes that are unvaccinated. So fuck those guys, right? Well, you're wrong. I mean, there are a lot of Trump people that are unvaccinated, but go into the inner cities, there are a lot of Democrats that are unvaccinated too. So if I had to guess, as a political scientist, I'm not a political scientist. I have a political science degree. How about that? Whatever that makes me. I would guess it's probably 50-50. That it's somewhere between 40-60, 60-40. How about that? As far as which party has the most unvaccinated people. Now, I glanced at, just in a way to give myself some background on, one, if YouTube would even let me say the word Civil War in a context of coming Civil War. And I found out there were a few videos online, all by, academics, leftists, Marxists, what have you. So I clicked on one. It was sponsored by the 538 people, if you know who they are. They are the data crunchers, the prognosticators. See, got that one out. Big word that I got out. Prognosticators, data crunchers, data modelers, I would argue all Democrats that try to tell you who's going to win each election cycle. So they interviewed a political science professor, Barbara F. Walter. No, not that one. I had to look that up. Barbara Walters is actually still alive, if you can believe that. I thought she was dead, but she's actually still alive. But this isn't her. This is another Barbara Walter. And she's studied Civil War for 30 years, and it's about a 30-minute interview. And I got through 9/10 of it, and then I was like, all right, that's enough. But her theory is that Civil War is probably, it could happen in the United States. She thinks the conditions are relatively good for a civil war in the United States. I totally disagree with her reasoning as to why. And I told you, she's a political science professor, so, take a guess what party she votes for. All you had to do is listen to 5 minutes of her podcast and you knew right away. She believes that the Republicans are entirely a white party, therefore the white people are losing power, and at a certain point, once the white party loses enough power and can no longer win any kind of national election, well, then we'll start a civil war. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but just because the Republican Party is mostly made of white people. That doesn't mean all white people are part of the Republican Party. There are a lot of white people that are in the Democrat Party. Believe it or not, the 538 guy pushed back on her on that, and he said, well, you know, here's the stats. He said in 1994, it was about 51-39 white people with the Democrats as opposed to the Republicans. And then in 2019, it was 53-42 with the white people with the Democrats as opposed to the Republicans. So he said the numbers kind of don't show that, you know, all white people are Republicans. It's like, if all white people were Republicans, the Republicans would never lose another election. But that doesn't happen. You know, all this young group here, there are a ton of white people that graduate college that don't want anything to do with the Republicans for whatever reason. So I disagree with her conclusion there that it's going to be a race-based civil war started by the Republicans. I think if a civil war breaks out, I don't think it's going to have a hell of a lot to do with race. I think it's going to have to do with one group of people, probably the Republicans, are tired of being told what to do by an autocratic government that doesn't listen to the people. And these vaccination mandates are a good example. Now, the way I think this is going to break down is in locally. In other words, there's not going to be a vaccination mandate in the red areas. Certainly not in a red area where the Republicans control all the branches of government. Let's say Texas, let's say Florida, Oklahoma. The governor of Oklahoma isn't going to come out and go, all right, I'm taking over. This is enough of this bullshit. We're going to lock up these unvaccinated people. Going to have the National Guard just double check that they're home all the time and they never go anywhere. May even just tow their cars so they can't go anywhere. I'm taking this step. We're going to take care of this pandemic. That's not going to happen. The guy would be thrown out on his ear in a matter of 24 hours if he did something like that. Nobody wants these goddamn vaccination mandates in these red areas. We don't want them. So it won't happen like that. It could happen in the blue areas, though, in the heavily blue areas where the young people are concentrated, cities. You know, if down in the city of Philadelphia, if the mayor said, yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable that we lock the unvaccinated in their homes and apartments and don't let them out. Most people down there would probably go, hooray, let's do that. Now, you know, you're outnumbered if you're unvaccinated down there. What do? Well, you move. I mean, you got no recourse there. What are you going to do? You're going to go to court, and there's a Democrat judge there, as the Democrat lawyers. They want you locked up. They're not going to rule in your favor. So you're going to see, and vice versa, if you're a nervous Nelly mask Karen living out here in free Pennsylvania, red Pennsylvania, and you're terrified because no one else will wear a mask, and these unvaccinated people are just roaming free, like, you know, free-range chickens. Well, God, that's ridiculous. I don't want that. So I need to go somewhere where I'm safe. So you would gravitate towards the cities and go down there where you can be among your own people and be safe. So I think you might start having dangerous migration where the blue gets bluer and the red gets redder. And that's just a formula for war. That's just disaster. That's bad. That's just bad. But as long as the governments keep pushing this kind of autocratic nonsense that people are going to rebel against, you're going to have this. This could happen. So another word I learned by listening to Dr. Walder, anocracy. Let me write that down for you. ANOCRACY, anocracy. She says that anocratic governments are more likely to have a civil war than, say, a democratic government or a dictatorship. What's an autocratic government? It's a hybrid between a democrat and a totalitarian government. In other words, it's not quite democratic, it's not quite totalitarian. Frankly, I think that describes where we're at pretty well. We're supposed to be a democracy, but I've got to show papers in our nation's capital to walk around our nation's capital. Our ancestors died fighting wars so we could be free. And we used to joke about countries that were so screwed up that they forced their populace to have papers. Now it's happening here. And we're just kind of, it's a completely blue area. So people like me just kind of go, well, I guess I won't go to Washington, D.C. anytime soon. That's all I can think of, is that people in red areas will just stay in the red areas. It's been made pretty clear to us that we're not wanted in the blue areas. And they're going to make sure we know that we're not wanted. It's like, all right, we've decided that we're all going to wear these masks forevermore. And if you don't want to be down with that, well, then don't come into our city. If you want to watch a ball game in our city, go screw. The only way you're getting in is wearing our silly mask. You want to see a play? Gotta wear a silly mask. You gotta want to come out here and bar hop? Well, you got to show your papers and then wear the silly mask. We're just not going to do that. We're just not doing that. So, and people, there must be Republicans trapped in these cities somewhere. So there may not be many of them. If I were one of those people, I'd be getting the hell out as fast as I could. So I think that's what you're going to see. Now where's the Civil War going to start? Well, it's in these 60-40 areas or 40-60 areas. What happens when an area that's, say, 60-40, 60-40 blue, and they decide, all right, that's enough. We've got control of the county government. We're enacting all kind of edicts and masks, and we're going to have the sheriff lock in the unvaccinated in their homes, and we're going to do all this stuff. What does the 40% do? It's like, well, shit, I just moved here from New York, and now I thought I was safe here, and now I got to move again? So then what happens? Are they going to just take it? Are they going to get assistance from adjacent red counties? Are they going to swoop in there then and assist the people being locked in their homes by the blue government? Or are we just all going to let them do it and just say, oh, well, they're not locking me in a home? I saw a clip on Twitter, and I didn't investigate it. I just glanced at it once, and that is it. I hope I'm not misrepresenting what happened in it. But it was in Australia. What I'm describing to you people over and over and over again in these videos is not a United States phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Liberty is under assault on planet Earth, everywhere. Everywhere liberty is under assault right now because of this pandemic, which has enabled every class 1 government in the world to try to subjugate its citizens. So at any rate, Australia, which has just gone full Nazi, they've just, let their Nazi flag fly. They're at it looks like it's the middle of the day, probably a weekend. Policemen walk up to a crowded bar. Everybody's there having fun, drinking. Well, the policemen want to check papers. They get their little mask on. Nobody's got masks on inside the bar. And it looks to me like probably the owner of the bar and a number of the patrons just stand at the doorway and say, you're not coming in. You're not coming in. So policemen turn around, go away. Well, then in the middle of the night, the policemen show up at the bar owner's home and they arrest him. And I'm thinking to myself, this is just like Solzhenitsyn's book, The Archipelago Gulag. Archipelago Gulag, if you've never heard of that. That's the famous book that was written by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a political prisoner in Soviet Russia in the 50s. And he wrote a book about his experiences in the Soviet prison system. If it wasn't for his book, a lot of what the Soviets did would have been down the memory hole, covered up, gone, lied about, changed, history changed. No, the Soviets never mass incarcerated their population. That never happened. Lie. Yes, they did. Solzhenitsyn's a witness. He wrote a huge book. I've tried to get through it, and it's just so many pages, and I don't concentrate as well as I used to, so it's hard. But right in the front of the book is one of his key quotes, is basically he's talking about getting arrested, and he just, and I can't give you the quote exactly, I can just summarize it. It was along the lines of, we sat in the camps and we burned in our jail cells and whatnot, and thought, what if, when they came to arrest us, we had fought back? But we didn't love liberty enough, so that didn't happen. But what if we had? What if we had just said, we got nothing to lose, and we had fought back? That's one of his main quotes in that book about, here we go. We're getting arrested in the middle of the night for these ridiculous COVID violations. When do we fight back? And that's what's going to happen in these 60-40 areas if the government keeps pursuing these idiotic COVID lockdown mandate, autocratic rules, mandates, laws. Sooner or later, that sort of thing is going to happen in these purple areas. You can do it probably without anything happening in the blue areas. They won't have the balls to do it in the heavy red areas. But in the purple areas, I could see it happening. And that's where people could get really hurt. And guns drawn, shots fired. And then I keep asking myself, and this is basically, I'm asking myself, but I'm asking you, moderate Democrats, is this what you want? I mean, is this really what you want? Do you really think that it's worth it over this virus? This is the end of the world? This virus is the end of the world? My God, don't go there. Don't keep going down this road. It's not worth it. Don't lock up the unvaccinated. It's not going to help for one thing, it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. You think it's some magical bullet that's going to end the pandemic. You've been wrong just about right down the line on everything during this whole pandemic. You guys have been wrong. Why are you right now? I'm just putting that out there. Maybe you're not right. Maybe locking up the unvaccinated won't do what you think it's going to do. Furthermore, it's going to have unbelievably bad consequences. The collateral damage from this is going to be catastrophic. It's like killing a fly with a nuclear weapon. What are you doing? Don't do this. So that's my thoughts there. But yeah, I saw these numbers, I saw these polls, and I thought, if these people get what they want, we're all going to be regretting it. We're going to regret it in the red areas where we are unvaccinated, or we're sympathetic to the people that are unvaccinated, and then the people that are jamming it down our throats and causing these ridiculous mandates and lockdown policies to be implemented, ultimately they're going to regret it too. There'll come a time when they're looking at the smoking wasteland of what they've created, and they'll say, oh, gee, what if we hadn't done all this? It'll take them a while because people would rather shoot themselves in the head than admit they're wrong, but it'll take them a while. But ultimately, and deep down in places they don't talk about at parties, they'll admit it. So, hey, that's all I got for you. Hey, if you liked the video, hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, hit the like button. I won't tell. If you want to subscribe, go ahead. As I keep saying, I don't expect conditions in this country to improve anytime soon, so I expect these videos, I'll keep making them. I wish I didn't have to. So, Hey, thanks. I'm Eric Arnold. I believe in free speech. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk again.